problem we often find in modern scholarship, as well as in scholars from the past few centuries, is the way they approach criticism of others' writings. Take the case of Louis Massignon, whom I will be discussing today. Some criticize him primarily on the basis of his Christian faith. However, the real focus should be a close reading of his texts, primarily his major works. It is neither fair nor relevant to argue whether he was a Christian or not. What tends to happen is that when someone wants to argue against someone, they latch into aspects of his personal beliefs, creating an image of him that is entirely their own. This imagined perception then shapes their criticism, leading them into a fantasy of their own making about the person they're criticizing. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened in the case of Massignon. Before delving into the main topics of this discussion, which will be somewhat longer compared to my other videos on Orientalism, I want to explore the life and works of Louis Massignon, a prominent Orientalist often criticized by Edward Said in his seminal work, Orientalism. Massignon holds a unique position as a scholar, deeply respected by both the Christian and Muslim communities. Within Islamic circles, he was even granted the honor title of Sheikh. His contributions to Islamic studies are monumental, particularly his exhaustive research on the mystic Mansur Hallaj, culminating in a 4-volume work widely regarded as the definitive study on Hallaj. This magnum opus was the result of decades of dedication, beginning in Massignon's earlier years and continuing until the end of his life. For this video, I plan to structure the discussion in 3 parts. The first will focus on Massignon's life and scholarly contributions. The second will address the history of Mansur al-Hallaj, while the third about Edward Said's criticism of Massignon's and Orientalism. Massignon's life is an example of profound admiration for learning, especially in the context of the Muslim world. However, he has also faced criticism for his dual role as a scholar and a diplomat, with some accusing him of political maneuvers against the Ottoman Empire. Nonetheless, it is undeniable that he was remarkably well-read, mastering multiple languages and disciplines, qualities that surpass many contemporary Muslim scholars. Massignon's interest in Islam, and in particular Mansur al-Hallaj, began in 1907 when he first encountered Hallaj's name. In a letter to his father, Massignon wrote about his growing fascination with Hallaj. Based on his readings of archaeological and historical works, he described Hallaj as a figure of profound beauty, whose martyrdom carried a deep and tragic resonance. Massignon expressed his desire to dedicate his doctoral thesis to this extraordinary mystic, a commitment that would last for his lifetime. Massignon's journey into the Islamic world began in 1904, marking his first serious effort to engage with the Orient. During this period, he traveled extensively, researching as far as Fez. Despite coming from a devoted Catholic background, his faith, deeply rooted in both his father's and mother's sides of the family, his fascination with the Islamic world grew stronger over time. An important early influence in Massignon's life was the Egyptologist Maspero, the father of one of Massignon's friends, who introduced him to aspects of the Orient. While Massignon's initial pursued academic studies in mathematics and philosophy, his intellectual curiosity led him to explore diverse fields, including French literature, Sanskrit, and history. After returning from his travels, he devoted himself to studying Arabic and deepened his understanding of the Islamic world. He also conducted significant research on Algeria, which became the focus of one of his theses. It was during this exploration of Algeria that he may have encountered the Hungarian Islamic scholar Goldziher. Before this meeting, Massignon was already familiar with prominent Orientalist scholars. However, Goldziher's influence was particularly noteworthy. During this meeting, Goldziher reportedly described Massignon as his true successor. Massignon's network of intellectuals extended beyond Orient. He admired Carl Jung for teaching him about the efficiency of prayers and maintained a friendship with Gabriel Marcel, the famous existentialist philosopher, These diverse interactions reflect the breadth of Massigno's intellectual pursuit and his deep engagement with both the spiritual and academic spheres of his studies. Many great figures like Hallaj profoundly influenced Louis Massignon on his spiritual journey. Among these were Karl Huysman and Charles de Foucauld, as well as Lidwina, a Dutch saint who deeply impacted Massignon with his notion of substitution. This concept closely parallels with the idea of badl found in the teachings of Hallaj, where one takes on suffering or responsibility for others. In fact, the notion of badl inspired the name of the Badaliya group, which Massignon co-founded with several Muslim scholars. I don't know exactly where this group was formed. Arguably, it is thought to have roots in Egypt, though its strongest followers emerged in France. He spent a significant portion of his life in Egypt, particularly in Al-Azhar, where he studied philosophy and engaged with prominent Muslim scholars. He also traveled to Istanbul to search the manuscripts related to Hallaj and Sufi terminologies. These efforts concluded in foundational works that continue to shape modern understanding of Islamic scholarship. The Arabic course, titled The Historical Formation of a Philosophical Vocabulary, taught at the Egyptian University of Cairo during 1912 and 1913, as described by Massignon, allowed him to delve deeply into the origins of Hallaj's technical vocabulary. Later in Athens, at a prominent conference, Massignon publicly presented his research on Hallaj, focusing particularly on the mystic's famous proclamation, Ana al-Haq, or I am the truth. These words attributed to Hallaj became the symbol of his heresy and martyrdom. This presentation marked a crucial moment in Massignon's academic career, solidifying his reputation as the leading scholar of Hallaj. Before diving further into Hallaj's story, it is worth reflecting on some other aspects of Massignon's life and scholarship. In some circles, Massignon has been compared to T.E. Lawrence, with Lawrence was to Britain, Massignon was to France. There is even a photograph of the two standing together, which confirms that they met at some point in their lives. However, it would be reductive to view them through the same lens. While both had political roles, their approaches and motivations were fundamentally different. Lawrence, whom I will discuss as a man of science and pragmatism, was driven by geopolitical objectives. However, Massignon, deeply inspired by Hallaj and Islamic mysticism, viewed his work as a spiritual and intellectual pursuit. This contrast highlights the unique path Massignon carved for himself, blending scholarship, spirituality, and a deep reverence for the Islamic world. In his descriptions, we can see how Massignon was deeply impressed by Muslim culture, particularly during his time in Baghdad, where he connected with families who helped him gather much of the materials on Hallaj. It was through this spiritual engagement with Hallaj that Massignon came closer to Christianity. There is, however, a description of Massignon by Bormans, a missionary, that I might not fully agree with, particularly in how he explains Massignon's views on Islam. Borsman argues that Massignon viewed Islam as a faith where one cannot know the essence of God, but rather his essence is understood only through the laws revealed to the people. If we adhere to this interpretation, it would be difficult to rationally argue that Massignon, who regarded Islam as an Abrahamic faith and saw Hallaj as a spiritual father, could claim that someone like Hallaj, through Islam, achieved the love of God. This love for God is not just about his attributes, but reaches his very essence. The truth Hallaj proclaimed even when his head was severed from his body. Louis Massignon's monumental work on Mansur al-Hallaj, spanning 4 volumes, is the focus of this discussion. While some critics have dismissed it as a fanciful narrative, accusing Massignon of selectively including details that suited his perspective, my reading of the work suggests otherwise. It is clear that Massignon's intention was not to glorify or disparage the spiritual aspect of Hallaj, but to gather and synthesize all the available historical record related to him. This effect is evident in the preface of the newer edition of his work, where Massignon explicitly acknowledges the challenge of compiling the extensive historical material on Hallaj. The third and final section of this magnum opus includes Hallajian bibliography organized chronologically. It catalogs 952 works by 636 different authors, 516 in Arabic, 102 Persian, 70 Turkish, 6 Malaysian, 7 Indian, 4 from Syria, and 2 Hebrew, and 225 European. Massignon's engagement with Hallaj was not coincidental. It stemmed from a profound and personal search for meaning. Hallaj's understanding of God as an essence of desire, a creative source of all inspiration, deeply resonated with Massignon. Hallaj's mystical journey revealed an ecstatic truth, union with the absolute creative world in the culmination of life's trials and tribulations. Historically, Hallaj was married once and had at least 3 children. Among them, his son Hamd wrote a bibliography for his father that remains a key source for our understanding of Hallaj. Known for his extensive travels, Hallaj visited Mecca 3 times and journeyed through Iran to India twice, often confronting vocational conflicts, experiences that likely mirrored those of Massignon as a traveler and seeker. From 1922 until his death in 1962, Massignon continuously expanded his knowledge of Hallaj. His life travels and his scholarship were deeply shaped by this mystic, whose passionate concern for humanity distinguished him from most other Muslim mystics. Hallaj's approach to union with God was rooted in love and manifested through public engagement and fraternal gestures rather than solitary meditation. His disciple Ibn Attah, who was martyred shortly before him, aptly summarized this ethos. The way of union with God is through fraternal love. Massignon too embraced this principle in his vocation, grounding it in both small and grand acts of solidarity. On May 24, 1922, almost exactly 1,000 years after Hallaj's execution in Baghdad, Massignon submitted his groundbreaking doctoral thesis on this martyr mystic of Islam. This complementary thesis also became a cornerstone for Orientalist studies and religious history. Even in his final years, Massignon sought to express the truths he had covered not only through scholarship but through tangible acts of faith and devotion. At the time of his death, he was working on an article for a commemorative volume celebrating the 1200th anniversary of Baghdad's founding. The subject was Khidr Ilyas, the legendary patron saint of Baghdad and a spiritual guide of Musa in Surah 18 of the Quran. This figure, central to Sufi mystical traditions, traces its origins to the ancient Mesopotamia, Epic of Gilgamesh, and perhaps the biblical narratives in the search for immortality. In many ways, the figure of Khidr mirrors Massignon himself, a tireless traveler and seeker, steadfastly accompanied by his spiritual companion to the very end. As written by some of the biographers, Massignon in his later years became a kind of saint-like figure for the people who knew him. It was a change that also made him somewhat respected and also the reason for some people hating him. But his understanding of the life that he was trying to achieve mysteriously was found by him. His writings against the wars in the world, a prominent example being his statements against the Algerian War, where he was a part of a demonstration with Jean-Paul Sartre, and various other accounts suggest that in the later period of his life, he was completely a changed person. Till the very end, he was adding to the work that he did on Hallaj for new editions. This is why the first edition is about half the size of what we have now. The copy of the Passion of Hallaj that exists in 4 volumes in English. The point of interest for any reader closely studying Massignon, including his philosophical writings, lies in the broad range of topics he addresses, such as the concept of time and nature. Among his prominent works are those regarding Islam and many other subjects. What stands out is how a Christian like Massignon seeks to uncover the truth or the true nature of faith through a distinct faith tradition. For Massignon, the figure of Hallaj is neither exclusively Muslim nor Christian, but rather someone who holds within himself a profound secret about the true nature of God, our existence, and the world. Hallaj, as often quoted by Massignon on various occasions, was not a man confined to his religion. For Massignon, Islam is a religion rooted in Abrahamic teachings, and aspects of it illuminate Hallaj in ways that few have achieved, even while following Islam. Massignon's entire approach, as seen in his works, especially the 4-volume corpus of Hallaj, is an attempt to understand the life of someone who, in his view, witnessed the true face of God. Hallaj's claim of truth as a unifying idea was rare, as few dedicate their lives to teaching others the truths of God they discover. Hallaj, as we trace his life, was not a passive figure, but an active traveler, striving to reveal the true face of God to the people. This active devotion is mirrored in Massignon's own life, as he gave up many aspects of his earlier years to devote himself to understand Hallaj more deeply. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first part of the video where I have provided a concise description of Louis Massignon and some of his motivations. In the next part, I will discuss key points related to Hallaj and Massignon's work on him. After that, I will explore Edward Said's arguments and perspectives on Massignon's and his contribution. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a good day.